Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Kero Riri Paddle, and today I'm sitting down with Dr. Fulya Çelikel, also known as DrSynthLady. Hello, hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Lady is much easier, isn't it?
Yes, it is. How are you doing?
I'm doing very fine, thank you. And you?
I can't complain at all. I'm actually very excited for this interview. Let's give a little bit of a background. We appeared on episode 99 of Geosynths as part of the Facebook group Guess episode, and I was very impressed by everything that you do, and I'm a very big fan of your channel. I'm excited to talk a little bit about not only what you do on your YouTube channel, but also your profession in music, your education, and, well, about whatever else.
Thank you. I don't yet deserve the praise, but I'm a hardworking person and I have been lucky about tutors, let's say. So it is going to perhaps come out a little bit more into the light in the near future. What I usually try to do is just experiment. I see myself as a scientist with a degree, of course. I'm a social scientist earnestly, so I have a degree on musicology. And in order to get a degree, a musicology degree, you really need to learn about scientific method. And that means being very comprehensive about everything, putting proof before just your wishful thinking. Therefore, that's what I'm trying to do with music, to try to make things work the way you would write a scientific paper. So that really doesn't put me in the position of a very prolific musician. I wish I could spare more time for music, but I do also have a university post and I have a family, two young kids. A lot of things, therefore, are usually short of time. So then I always think back and say, oh, I could have done this maybe a little bit better. But that dissatisfaction actually drives you. So I'm still in the process of learning, by no means a complete professional, but I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy the audio world, and I definitely think it needs more women, more of me, and more of every other woman who's brave enough to say, okay, I have my voice here too.
Very well put. And I do agree with you 100%. I'm so excited to actually get to the bottom of your thinking, and I'm sure that everyone who sees this will also fall for what you're saying and the work that you do.
Thank you.
So, you introduced us a little bit to yourself and your musical background, but maybe you can tell us how you got into music and why you decided to pursue it educationally and then professionally.
Actually, I wouldn't think any musician asked on this planet can explain where that sense of belonging comes from. I felt as if I was remembering, not I was learning while I was learning music. So it was a very strong attraction even when I was very young. And therefore, I felt like I have just found my path in life. This feeling has never left me. It's like 30 years now. I was her age, I guess.
Hello,
When I
hello.
started, there she is, my little blondie. Uh, so I didn't start to play anything because I didn't have such an environment while I was growing up. I have a very unmusical family. I'm the only person who was interested somehow. I really asked my parents for a little keyboard and they complied only when I was 11. I started piano lessons at 13. That's really late if you want to be a concert pianist, but I thought I could do that. So I don't remember much about my teenagers, but practicing all the time on whenever I find an opportunity on whichever piano I find. So when I finally got a piano of my own, I was 16. Then at 17, I had to sort of really fool my parents and tell them, okay, I'm going to pursue a biology degree. That was what I got into in the university entrance exam of my country. But I ended up taking in secret the entrance examinations of Bilkent University's Music and Stage Arts faculty, and I was accepted into the music theory and composition department. That's how it began. I was just 17 and I was even unable to go back to the other university where I was accepted for the biology department and get back my high school diploma. They said, "You're not an adult. We can't give you that." So it was an adventure. It was really a tumultuous beginning. Anyway, I ended up being a scholarship student for 6 years, graduating, getting another scholarship, going to the Netherlands to study. I wasn't really fit to be a concert pianist. You could never be actually if you start at 13 and you also have to go to a normal school besides music lessons. So I didn't get to actually maybe play concert repertoire with an orchestra or everything, but I studied the pedagogy of being a pianist, basically, how you learn it, how you have to come over technical difficulties, what kind of issues do you have to solve before you could call yourself a professional pianist. Meanwhile, of course, I had to play very difficult repertoire too. So I did graduate, for instance, with playing all the four Chopin ballades and a lot of other difficult music besides. After that degree, I worked basically whatever was possible within my sector. I conducted a festival. Since I could speak like 3 languages, it was a Turkish-themed festival in Ukraine. So that's where I went and conducted the affairs for about 6 months. I taught at a project at a music school in Germany, a project to redeem Turkish children who are more prone to domestic violence through music. That was a very fun thing to do. I did pretty much everything. I gigged, of course, I accompanied choirs. That was like 6, 7 years, and I was sort of always looking forward to what next opportunity will there be. And one next opportunity just asked me if I could play metal. And I said, "Oh, why not?" It never occurred to me before, but I started playing in a metal band, and that changed my life. I found what I was wanting for most. So I went back to Turkey, started a degree on musicology, but this time I was working on actually popular music and popular music pedagogy. I wanted to find out why people are somehow drawn to such things, why music just defines them a path and they're compelled almost to pursue it, like actually someone possessed. So I will never, I guess, make a metalhead 100%. So for most metalheads, I guess I'm a sort of poser. But I feel very driven somehow when I especially play progressive metal. That's the music we were doing. So after, of course, an early album, the band disbanded, but I went on somehow and completed the PhD. Therefore, here I am, partially classical musician, partially metalhead, partially a person who's learning electronics and studio technologies. All in all, I would say it's a privilege that I could choose all of these. Maybe if it were in Persia, as we were talking, or if it were like 20 years ago, I wouldn't find the opportunity. So I feel so grateful. That's why I feel like I should give back to the community, to the world that enabled this extraordinary trek for me. So, long story short, here we are.
And what a story. That was a real odyssey. I am very impressed, and I think it's magnificent what you've gone through and how much music has meant to you that you would do such things. It's a movie right there, if you ask me.
I will write a book one day. I'm really certain of that. I'm going to do this. It will make a nice novel.
It really would, and I would look forward to that if and when it does come about. I do want to talk about metal, and I do want to talk about also your experiences playing. But for now, let's talk about your YouTube channel. What brought you to doing YouTube? I see not only a lot of activity recently, but on your channel, your most recent video was an introduction to orchestra and talking about Western instruments and how they fit within like musical compositions. You have a video that's very extensive and very useful about Music Theory 101. You have covers, you have originals, you have lectures, you have product overviews. How did all of this come about, and how did you decide to put it on your YouTube?
Well, if you look at the video dates, most of them are quite recent. That was the breaking point when I was finally asked if I could represent a company which not many people know that is Turkish. I work for KV331 Audio, which produces the soft synthmaster. Synthmaster and its lighter version, Synthmaster 1, have been actually quite acclaimed. We have won the Music Radar polls and such. So nobody thinks that a synth out of Turkey could be so comprehensive and so powerful. And what I do is to act as not only the brand face, but also the person who prepares, for instance, the user manual videos. So I learned, therefore, sound design on a much deeper level. And as my knowledge about that grew, I thought, why shouldn't I just start a YouTube channel? There are so many male YouTubers who are very good at what they do, but very few female YouTubers. And maybe I can give something new. I would just have a different point of view, since I would maybe foreground different things. So that's how I started, with very humble equipment, very small things, such as, for instance, I have one video on how to connect an iRig Pro, which is like a very tiny audio interface that you can connect either to your iPhone or to your iPad. It's a mobile sound card for means and purposes. But I'm very sure there are very comprehensive and very technical other tutorials about it. What I do is just to show how I use it. And that happened to really be catching people. And that's basically my motivation. About the lectures, I would say if we try to not conscript people into art music is going to disappear. And I feel that this would be such a great loss. It is not a music of dead white European male composers for old, mostly white, elitist, rich people. This is just such a misrepresentation. We should come over this. And if I can help a single grain of sand, then this is achievement unlocked for me. So it's because of my love of this music that I dabble in opera, I dabble in, for instance, orchestration. I have taken all those lessons. I have like also yet another master's degree on historical musicology too. So what good is my knowledge to me if I hoard it? That's why I just try to, whenever I find time and whenever my university students demand, of course, whenever they need some supplements, I just make it for YouTube and upload to my channel. So that's basically it. And about performances, yes, I think most old videos, especially are performance videos. I'm often told I don't have the greatest singing voice, but I do love writing songs, and I do love arranging songs on different setups, different studio setups. So I asked my followers, please put up with my voice. I know it is not great, but I mean, there are worse singers. And I'm a pretty good instrumentalist, I would say. So that's basically the essence of everything I do.
I will say that Billy Corgan, one of my favorite musicians from the Smashing Pumpkins, isn't known for his singing voice, but at the same time, he does have a very interesting timbre. He knows how to compose and songwrite well, and he puts all of that together into very interesting and compelling music. And I think you do the same, except you sound a lot better than Corgan. So
thank you. This is a compliment. Maybe I couldn't yet find my audience.
I'm sure it'll come. It seems like you're very invested in contributing to knowledge and furthering someone's interest in music.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an educator. That's also a calling besides music, because not many people have that actually, and people sort of really scorn educators, which is so wrong. A good educator can help you find that calling in life. And if I'm a good educator and I'm showing people the way, like I had to struggle and find myself, then this will be my legacy, basically. Actually, recently I have applied for a government fund in my own country, Turkey. And if I manage to get it, I'm going to set up a web page, a totally free web portal, which will be a translation of musictheory.net. If your followers don't know that website, it's a very good one. Most lessons are free. They have an app, actually, an iOS app, which is not free, but it is worth every penny. And that teaches you how to read sheet music, how to read notation, how to make sense of musical terms and symbols. And we don't have anything at all, its equivalent in Turkish. So people are lost. People cannot really connect what is being told at school and what they hear and what kind of music is around them in the traditional sense. Of course, Turkish music was also studied and devoted to writing, committed to paper, using the Western notation. So a bağlama player from Kars is unable to go into the Turkish radio and television's archives and find a folk song which is compiled and committed to Western notation in the 1930s by his grandfather and play it because he cannot read notation. If I could abridge that, that would be really my legacy. That would be something that I really want to do. So I applied for that funding. I'm waiting for it. Therefore, I would say educating as much as performing excites me too.
That's very selfless. That's incredible what you do.
Thank you.
I wish when I was growing up that we had educators like you. Of course, I grew up in the very early stages of the internet, pre-YouTube, but it still would have been incredible to see, as someone who went to music school, who went to art schools throughout his life, to actually have someone that wanted to supplement what we were being taught, and they would expand the concept and the history of music. Like you were saying, it's not just classical, it's not just read sheet music and accept it for the format that it originally came in. We need to keep up with the times. Before, music used to be about creating something that would continue to push and further what the genres were, and now it seems like so many people would rather just keep it in the past and let it stay there. So I'm very excited to hear what you're doing, and I'm sure my followers, your followers, and many others who will come to your channel are going to look forward to what you're going to put out eventually.
Thank you.
Let's move over to the topic of instruments. You have a lot of amazing instruments and you seem very capable on the technological side as well. Let's start with software. Tell us about the software that you use.
Well, actually, as a DAW, I prefer Studio One. I have version 5.2, the complete version. It comes, of course, as you know, with a plugin suite, which is really handy. I mean, they don't really act to me as dismissible stock plugins that you cannot really mix with. I can't say I'm a great mixer, but I'm I think a good recorder and a rather patient editor. So I'm trying to learn how to mix. I have a teacher. Whenever we find time, we have lessons on Zoom and such. I watch tutorials and such. I also can use Ableton Live with 10. I have been doing live performances, done some recording. So besides the DAWs, what I usually use is, of course, third-party plugins. I'm, as you know, representing KB331 Synthmaster, so I know that software very well, obviously. But besides that, I have been using also other soft synths and other controllers too. For instance, Rolly, I have the Songmaker kit that comes with a very interesting plugin suite. It's got its equator, a synth. Besides, it's got this very interesting drum interface, this light pad block, and that's what I learned how to create loops with. I also do have a Machine MK3, which I barely can use yet. So I never had the time to spend on it. I should learn it this summer better because I know it's very powerful and very capable, and I'm not doing it justice. As MIDI controllers, I have a collection of lightweight travel keyboards, actually many of them, since my main task for Synthmaster was actually to represent and try the mobile products wherever I go. Before COVID, it was a lot of places, actually. I was going to all the IMSTA events, to London, to Berlin, to overseas to Canada actually, and everything is right now, of course, grounded. I have an open ticket to Canada, for instance, and besides many conferences, of course, for the academia side. So that's why I was just taking an iPad or an iPhone, and with a MIDI controller like the X Key by it's right now it's a brand is represented by RTGA Pro. So I was just making music at the seaside somewhere in Thailand. That really I enjoyed so much. I hope we go back to that life, that pre-COVID vibe, so to speak. So for small MIDI controllers, I have a collection. That's why I got the Maker Kit too. As a big MIDI controller, I don't have much. I'm usually using one of my smaller Roland keyboards here. It's an XPS 10. I'm a local Roland artist for Turkey. That doesn't mean much, actually. They just give me a discount, actually. They don't do much else.
That's still pretty cool. I'm a Roland fan, so...
Really? I have made piano videos for them. It's a big series that was watched altogether in the millions. So people know me as a piano instructor. So that was sort of the exchange with Roland Turkey, I would say. So besides, I have many Roland keyboards, as you can see. This is my favorite one.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, he's gorgeous, isn't he?
Very much so.
Yeah, it's an axe edge, and well, it is hard to learn the guitar at first, especially if you're a classically trained pianist, but once you do, you can really shred on it. So I have been doing a lot of stage stuff with this. Well, it is my sort of signature instrument right now, but I also love my big hard synths behind me. I have the Roland FA08, the Jupiter 50, my love affair with the V-Synth GT recently actually brought me one. It's hard to find, the V-Synth GT is even rare on reverb.com.
Really?
So
wow.
I found, yeah, I mean, it is rare. It's not a vintage synth by any means. It's a 2007 release, but it was a very powerful synth. I think more powerful than Roland intended. So it didn't really complete its shelf life, I would say.
Yeah, that's Roland.
Still popular. It's still popular, so I got that too. And I have the small JDXI. That's really a very little hard nut to crack.
It is. So I'm going to do my reveal.
Yeah.
My JDXI.
Oh, you have it there too. I love the machine. I mean, it's really such a great thing. For that crack, you can't get anything better.
Yeah, I enjoy it as something just to pick up and get an idea out there, put up a demo, maybe come back to it later and flesh it out some more. Roland's good for that. They're good for throwing out products that you can utilize in any situation.
Indeed. I also have the Access Virus TI. I don't know if you can see. It's the white one at the bottom.
Yep.
And of course, many people will be envious. This is an original SH101 from 82, which you cannot see, but I can pick it up. I'm so afraid that it will be damaged. I don't even leave it on the current. So keep it here. Just there.
Wow.
It is an original, never opened.
Look at that beauty.
Still everything running. So it's older than me. And it's, of course, more like a legacy item. I can't say I prefer making music with it. All the modern keyboards are more powerful, but of course, many analog fans out there will disagree. I'm sorry, I love virtual analogs. Don't kill me.
No, that's actually really cool. I am so impressed by your collection. I said it before, I'm a bit of a Roland fan. So seeing all of what you have and also the other brands that you have, it's so cool. I am limited on what gear I do use right now. I do like to split up between software and hardware, but it seems like you're doing exactly what I want to do and what many musicians aspire to or are currently doing. You find a good and equal balance between the mobility and the flexibility of software and also the inspirational side of hardware. So I think that's something that everyone should look into. It's not just about only analog. It's not just about only vintage synths. Find what inspires you and make it work.
Indeed. Actually, what is very handy in that sense is that if you use a software to compile them all together, I use Camelot Pro, but there are other software out there. For instance, the main stage of Apple. It's running on iOS main stage. Everybody uses it for the most part. That can actually run both your software and hardware together, and you can create a virtual rig with it, as if you have done with the MIDI through box and MIDI cables. It just runs that virtually. What I do with Camelot Pro is to use a powered USB hub, hook all the keyboards that I'm going to use, and the software is running on the iPad. So you can create layers, for instance, or you can create scenes, songs, playlists. It's really great. You can create backing tracks and just playing on top of them. So complete performances you design, and the designing takes long, but on the stage it works miracles. I usually use, for instance, to switch between scenes, a Bluetooth wireless MIDI foot switch. I have this one, actually. The iRig Blue board. So
Nice.
this communicates wirelessly with the iPad. So I'm just like pressing a button and everything changes. And all I'm using is either the guitar as a controller, or maybe not even that, whatever I find in the studio as a MIDI controller. So right now, of course, things have been therefore easier than for say 20 years ago. People then had to really use a lot of cables and a lot of MIDI digging to get their instruments to communicate with each other. They're a little bit cheating on that, but it's really great. The blend of, powerful software and hardware and the flexibility of this kind of stage setup software is just immaculate, really.
We've come so far. I can't even imagine a world where we don't have the compatibility and connectivity that we have today with instruments. And I'm looking forward to what else comes out.
Yeah.
As we were saying,
we were talking about actual instruments.
Yes, we were. And I want to show off just a couple of my pieces.
Ooh. Oh, wow.
I actually had to move on from... I had a 909 that barely worked, and while it was cool to have it, I felt that I could take the money that I sold from that instrument and find something that's more practical for me. As much as I love having legacy instruments, as you had shown, having something like that, or in this case, like a D05 instead of a D50, or even something interesting and small like an SEO2. These instruments, for me, they open up the perspective of having a hardware piece of synth in front of you, but also having a lot of capabilities that analog synthesizers maybe didn't have in the past.
Indeed. So SH101, it is great, but still, I can get a much more complicated and powerful and compact and all in all useful sound out of the V-Synth GT. It's set in as a preset, for God's sake. Each time you will have to redesign a new preset on the SH101. So, I know analog guys don't agree, but I guess we just like easy side.
It's okay if they don't agree. It's quite fine. I prefer digital, and I love analog as an additional synthesis that you can use to help make tracks, but digital's the future. Digital's fun. Digital's nice. Analog has its sound, but you could do so much more with granular and digital and FM and all of these different styles. So I look forward to advances in synthesizer technology.
Indeed. And you can just see it evolve. When I think back, when we started KV331, of course, I'm a childhood friend of our CEO. So I was just observing from outside. I was just barely trying to learn how to play metal and such at that time. And he was talking rocket science to me back then. But then he was talking about FM synthesis, additive synthesis and such, trying to explain me their working principles. And now those are already so much in the past. They are staple work for all the synths out there in the market now. Everybody's keen on granular synthesis and more elastic methods to really blend, to emulate actually analog circuits and such. We will have granular synthesis with SynthMaster version 3 as well, which is hopefully going to go beta this summer. So, I mean, in a very short time, it's almost like Apple devices. When we think, we always perceive as if we had the iPad, for instance, forever. But when we think back, the first versions that were out there for us to buy was like only 10 years ago. Only 10 years ago. It's amazing that now the iPad became just so much bread and butter. It's indispensable. Any musician should have one iPad. So just
I agree.
Amazing, therefore.
I agree. My iPad never leaves my side. It's so useful for not just music, but for anything else on a day-to-day basis. If you ask anyone in the 80s and the 90s if they could have something that does what an iPad does, but also has so much musical capabilities, they wouldn't be able to wrap their head around it. Which is why I love embracing technology, and I love companies that look to integrate music with technology as much as they can.
I respect so much people who are still trying to, for instance, work with tape or analog tables that rust. I mean, I adore what they do, that commitment, that absolute love for that vintage gear. But I mean, we as sort of emerging people just don't have that luxury or that time or those resources for the most part. Just to keep up an SSL table in running order, like an SSL table from 30 years ago, how much would it cost today? Really, I mean, with a like $100 sound card, we pretty much can record. So
yeah, we've come so far.
Indeed.
Fulya,
Yes.
what hurdles have you encountered as a woman and a mother in the musical space? You mentioned that you yourself want to add more representation in this community, and I feel that you're definitely doing that, but you also mentioned that you do also have your set of haters. So would you mind sharing a little bit about all of those obstacles that you have had to overcome?
Well, actually, maybe I shouldn't say haters because it's a bit too shallow a word. I would say it's a more complicated thing what women who want careers in audio business face. And I'm not going to speak of vague things like the glass ceiling, because there will always be people who would say, oh, no, there is no glass ceiling, you're just not good enough. So it's a subjective thing. But what I can say as an objective sort of newcomer, and from a world which is, at least my university environment is much more egalitarian. We have actually more female employees in my university than male employees. I say my university because I've spent 13 years there. So that's a very long time as a working place. So therefore, I had the chance to observe. And in Times Higher Education Index, Sabancı University, where I work, is in the top 500 of younger universities. So it's not a very small, obscure university. It's one of the most representative universities of Turkey. So from that environment, coming into an environment where only 2% of producers are female, 18% of performers are female, is a bit, weird. And the worst thing is, what I can exemplify as if people dismiss you just because you're a woman. What I had to encounter, for instance, was I was doing a show in NAM 2020, and I was on the RTG stand, actually. We had actually something to do with like a memorandum of agreement with them. So they gave me a keyboard to carry around and do my mobile stuff. And I was so happy. I was posing with my 2 Artesia keyboards. I was saying, look, I'm an Artesia artist, whatever. So, and then people just write under that picture in Instagram, can she even play? I mean, this is so insulting. And without just looking at anything else, or like just me standing in the Synthmaster stand with my Synthmaster t-shirt on, and well, I do love wearing miniskirts. What's wrong with it? So they just call me, are you a stand hostess, just there to attract attention? People just dismiss you because you're a woman, and don't associate you with audio. This stereotype is something more hostile than any sort of glass ceiling high above your head. So hypothetically, maybe it is that too, but this is sort of a hurdle. This is something like obstacles just before even you begin. So many people, I'm sure, are discouraged by this. And some people just write again under video comments, she looks like a damn hot baby making machine. Okay, I might be looking like whatever to you, but isn't this insulting what I try to display there and the knowledge I display there just because I look this and that to you? I mean, this kind of attitude I find should change so that we could have more representation of women and LGBTQ community.
I'm so shocked to hear that, but I'm not surprised to hear that. I'm sorry that you have to go through that, especially in 2020, when if you see a woman at NAM and they're walking around with an instrument, more than likely she can play, and more than likely, if you're taking your time to discredit her, she can play circles around you. And you know, I've grown up with 5 sisters. I'm the only boy amongst many girls, and I've heard them come home from playing sports or playing music and they tell me stories like that, but I can't imagine them coming to my age and making it into a career after working so hard and putting so much time and effort and proving themselves, only to have someone just write them off without even looking into them just based off of how they look. That's ridiculous. And I really hope that we start respecting females more, not just within music, but any other creative community. And we look at the fact that they're musicians. Instead of looking at it as something that you antagonize, look at it as something you should embrace. And maybe, just maybe, we can all create better music and create a better environment by having women be more open and wanting to collaborate with us without feeling like they're going to be attacked.
And one other issue is ageism. Nobody cares if a male singer ages maybe somewhat ungracefully. Just look at Ozzy Osbourne, for example, or Axl Rose. So nobody criticizes how they look. Nobody criticizes if they put on weight or if they have white hairs. Imagine Jennifer Lopez aging the same way like Axl Rose. They are more or less the same age. But she is forced to look fit, to look young, to look desirable. I really pity when I think that she has to work so much just to maintain the appearance. I really admire people. For instance, there is this concert pianist called Lola Astanova. She really, I don't know how she finds time. She keeps her fingers in form, and besides, she really must be training so hard to keep the body in shape. And she sort of wears very blatant clothing and everything just to protest this attitude. I understand what the rationale behind her thinking, but of course, people just say you're dressing like a slut and such. So this, I think, we should also face this issue, this inequality. Why shouldn't women be showing their age? Why should aging be an ungainly, ugly thing for women, but nobody criticizes men? This issue should also be tackled. And I guess with a person who spent like 8 years on a PhD, so this wasn't like my prime looks, hypothetically, and I shouldn't be resenting, 10 years from now, when I have enough knowledge to shake the world, I won't look as good. So this shouldn't be a threat, you know. People should be more based, people should be evaluated more based on not their appearances, but their achievements. And this is true for most guys, but not for girls. That's the sort of inequality I would like to underline.
I really hope that you and others push forward these changing mentalities and we get into a better place.
Hopefully, with you giving us voice. I mean, guys like you who really have this very positivist, very open attitude, I think it will eventually happen, maybe in like 20 years, but hopefully we will be around to see it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I consider myself an ally. So I will do everything that I can to create a better world, not only for people like you, but people like my sisters and my children. I just want to see change.
Yeah.
On the topic of family, You have a wonderful family that is going to be coming up around very musical parents. Do you think you could tell us how you teach your children music now, and how will you teach them music as they get older and they decide to pick up either other hobbies or pick up maybe different instruments from what you play?
Well, I think I would have sort of really died to grow up in a house like this, but I didn't have the chance. I think they're immensely lucky. But as an educator who taught the piano for about, well, I started like very early with my university study and such. So I started teaching as I was a like little more than a child at 18 or 19. So I taught the piano for about almost 20 years now. And what I found out in that experience is that if you force, it will never come about. Children are even more adamant than teenagers, and you cannot force them to do anything. To force them is to lose them. So I never push or pull my kids. They're very young, anyways. One is barely 6; she will be 6 in the at the end of June, and the other one is just turned 4. So they're a bit maybe too early, but even if it was like 2 3 years from now, I would never push them. I will just um, display how happy I am, how rewarded I feel while I'm doing my musical things. I will just let them see that, and I'm sure they will be drawn somehow, maybe to different instruments. So my older one is more interested in drum sets, the only thing that we do not have at home. She says she wants to play a bass guitar, the only type of guitar we do not have. So, well, if she wants a bass guitar, we will buy one. And maybe I try learning it before she does. And well, now that we have moved the studio to what was our living room, this is quite a big space. We can't fit a digital drum set. So just to make it available, I think, and to nurture if they have any interest would be enough. Children are very resilient beings. I guess it's the most special period of being a human, the most special experience. Many people agree with that. And well, they will find their way if they're drawn to it. And I think it's much more exciting. Any kind of musical career is much more exciting than, say, working in a bank. So why should they choose to work at a bank? If
Oh,
they
I
can
agree with you
music, but
110%.
indeed. But if one says, okay, I'm going to be a scientist, or if one says, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be a teacher, whatever. So I won't put any obstacles and force them into music. That's what I'm thinking. It's already so magical that I'm very sure music is going to draw them and other children. And I will just show them what I can.
The future is bright for all of the young musicians. They don't know how lucky they have it.
Indeed.
Metal music.
Mm.
Can you tell
Yeah, I
us?
wore a very metal t-shirt here.
All right, all right. See, I love metal. I discovered it a little later in life. I always heard it. My mom listened to it, but it just didn't really mean a lot to me. I discovered metal and country around the same time, and they both really changed my perspective of music. Hard rock was as far as I ever got, but when I got into metal, it really showed me how you can express yourself in such a aggressive and fast-paced way, but also setting atmosphere and slowing down and dynamics and all of the different ways you can portray metal. Can you tell us some of the metal musicians that you like, metal music that you are listening to currently, and where you see metal going forward through the 20s?
Well, people were so certain after the 80s metal would be dead. And actually, in the 90s, there was this resurgence. Metal enjoyed even live at MTV, although it was a sort of maybe popularized metal. Not many people really consider metal bands like, for instance, Nickelback metal enough somehow. It's because, of course, everything that is represented by MTV is so much against the philosophy of metal that people are a little bit allergic to that. So that is a reason. But what endured, what lived on is, I think, more than more than the sound itself, more than the timbres, more than the techniques of recording, is basically the attitude, that protest, that scorn, discern for whatever belongs to the popular culture, that opposition, basically, that usually is in academia. There is this fancy word which is being used, I love it, transgression, which means it's a transgression of social norms, to protest those social norms somehow and to express your identity. No other music genres fan or performer you can so easily label just by their looks. And that's so strong about metal somehow. Wherever you go across the globe, when you see someone with such a t-shirt and with tattoos and this sign, you would label them as a metalheads. This is sort of trans nations, trans identities, trans cultures. It's very strong, therefore, the sense of belonging, the sense of community. And I would say it's more strong than even the music itself. People nowhere in music industry display so much fidelity to their identity. This is not my saying, this is Spotify statistics. Only metalheads listen to only metal somehow. All other musicians and music lovers just try their ears at more genres, but metalheads are really adamant in that. They just adhere to what they like most and listen to nothing else. This is, of course, not always a very positive attitude. And in my PhD thesis, I looked at why this almost bigotry. I mean, you're like looking at the front and never to the sides. It's a sort of really bigot attitude. Why does this come? Why do we still have young people without metal being visible at all in music industry are drawn to this genre? Now, guitars are more expensive than they were. In my country, for instance, the currency rate really raised a lot in the past 4 or 5 years. So young people have less and less access to instruments and basically recording, what when they want to learn, they have more limited means than, say, 10 years ago. But when I go to Kadıköy, for instance, I still see teenagers, like 12, 13-year-olds, wearing metal t-shirts and trying to get their hair longer, going around with their guitars proudly. It somehow recreates itself, the sense of belonging, the sense of fraternity. I do not want to use the word brotherhood, but so I'm just going French and say fraternity. I think that's the strongest asset of metal. About music itself, what I listen to, of course, being a musician who is sort of trained doesn't let me be as, how to put it, doesn't let me have basic tastes. I do like complicated music. I do like music which has a strong progressive vein, something smart. So I do listen to, for instance, a lot of Dream Theater and also gent these days somehow. I listen to Animals as Leaders, for instance. And whenever I want to listen to something melodic, I listen to Sonata Arctica, Amorphis, all this northern symphonic metal. What I do not really much like is what is labeled as female-fronted metal. I find it a bit excluding. All the themes are very predictable. So anything to do with more modern themes, more human, universal themes, such as progressive metal, draws me immediately. And performance is, of course, another very enjoyable aspect about it. You really have to work like you would work on a Chopin etude, on a score by Jordan Rudess, the same way with the same methodology. So this deep respect I have for basically all these wonderful keyboardists around who create music within these confines of the genre.
Wow. Wow, how articulate. I love metal. so much, and it's one of the, yeah, there we go. It's one of the genres where when people talk about it, you really see their eyes light up, and you see them really talking from the heart. It's it's cerebral. It's emotional. It's so many different feelings. Metal really is incredible. I love electronic music. I love trap. I love country. I love hip hop. I love R&B. I love metal, but I'm not gonna lie. When I do listen to metal music, when I'm listening to Metallica, old or new, Megadeth, Opeth, if I'm listening to any of
Oh,
them,
thank you. It's great music.
oh man, Gojira, Trivium, all of them, like they mean so much to me, and
It's
I
more
don't.
of a musician's music actually than, for instance, trap. You
I agree.
respect the artisanship that goes into it. You know, it really needs a very intense, very tight rhythmic handling. That's my only criticism, I would say. It just sometimes needs a little bit more flexibility, like jazz. You're always forced onto the metronome, you're always forced to the next beat. It needs to be very clearly comped each time the new beat comes. That sense of, being march like is my only
Yeah,
confinement sometimes. That's when I try to escape back to classical music at times. But all in all, it's such a great music to both make and listen to.
absolutely. I have a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
What do you think the music scene will look like when lockdown is over? Live, production wise, touring wise, trade shows, etc.
Actually, we should maybe perceive it from the positive side. This lockdown taught many musicians to be less sloppy about themselves and what they do. We needed to somehow make ends meet, and this meant that we had to acquire new skills, all of us. We had to make technology cope with us. We had to actually learn new ways to attract an audience. So maybe we shouldn't see it as a total loss and a total destruction of the scene. I think as the entire experience of history is a pendulum swing, and we were forced into this side of things, there will be a profusion of live events. People will just won't want to stay inside after the pandemic, and it will be therefore enough gigs for everyone. I hope so. We all missed the stage terribly, but I see it still as an asset that we had to learn how to broadcast concerts, how to mix YouTube videos, how to try to create personas so that we wouldn't be forgotten by our fans, basically. So it's a good lesson learned. And it made also the fans treasure what a live performance is and how is it so different than watching something on YouTube. That sense of belonging, that sense of feeling it on your skin, you can never have with any video. So I think they will also understand that to support the artists they like, they should go to gigs. They should never try to find free tickets. They should be more supportive, all in all, to make up for these losses basically suffered during the pandemic. So I anticipate, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I anticipate music industry getting even bigger and stronger after the pandemic. About, of course, the time lost with events and new technology. Well, we did have pretty decent online events. I prepared Synthmaster videos for instance, Gear Expo 2021 of Music Radars, and it was actually quite a successful thing. The good thing is, of course, what you prepare lasts. So you can always look back to it. You never forget the experience because it's there on video, it's recorded. So I try to take it from the positive side and say, all in all, maybe this is a good lesson learned. It's a good experience gained, but we want to go back to normal.
And I can't wait until we go back to normal.
Oh, indeed, I can't wait either.
I'm never going to miss another gig in my hometown again. I'm going to go to every single show. I'm going to play in multiple bands at the same time. I'm going to do everything. I feel that a lot of us, musicians especially, and our fans too, took for granted what music
Indeed,
is and what expression
indeed.
is.
We took it for granted, all of us, till we were deprived of it. It was never so important to try to support bands, basically, to go to small gigs. Now I think people will never be lazy to just leave their homes and go to a gig. They will understand what it means both for them and for the band that performs.
Absolutely. I know for a fact I've learned my lesson, and I'm
I hope it is a global lesson learned.
Do you have any advice for up and coming musicians, YouTubers, musical educators, or music students?
When I asked this question years ago, at the beginning of my PhD, to Joey Belladonna, he's better known, of course, as the soloist of many metal bands. He has his solo project, of course. I mean, many people know the name anyway. He was a little bit high, actually. We were having a backstage interview. But when he heard this question, he was dead earnest and he said, very honestly, people give up too early. People give up before there is a chance that they could pass through their haters, pass through their rollback, and just progress. And people just never think about putting on top of what they did and try to just, with an early thing, launch themselves and be discovered. This doesn't happen, he said. Joey Belladonna said this, not me. So he lived through that time where it was actually quite possible that you would be discovered at a gig and be launched as a world star. But even when he says this, I think we should just take this advice, put on top of it the digital world, the digital transformation that Belladonna never had to experience, and just learn our lesson. Especially in the beginning, we should work very hard. It's not rewarding. I know maybe only 100 people are going to watch this video, and maybe we will feel therefore dismayed. You don't earn money at the beginning. Anyways, you just have all these people who tell you, why don't you go get a serious job and whatever. Music is a serious job, and you just have to learn it. You just have to improve your skills, and it will come about. I'm just saying, even in a very disadvantaged country like in Turkey here, which doesn't even have PayPal, we have all these political issues. That's the subject of another interview. But we don't even have PayPal. But even me, living here in Turkey and working multiple jobs and such, is getting offers to prepare videos for professional audio companies in the States. So it means that everything is possible. All you need is some vision and some willingness to work.
Wow. Well thought out and something for people to really take and digest. What would you be doing in life if you weren't doing music?
Oh, this is such a fabulous question that I sometimes think about. What would I do without music? But life would be so void and so meaningless that my brain doesn't want to wrap around it. I would probably be a scientist, I guess, because life has always interested me. So it was no coincidence that I was accepted to a biology department, actually. So I would just be a biologist, I guess. I love everything about life. I think I would be just maybe doing genome editing or something. I would just do sequencing and PCR testing and such, probably. That would have been my career. But without music, I mean, I don't want to even imagine it. Nothing attracts me as much as music still after all these years.
And I think that the world is a better place with you having chose music over science. So
Thank you. Thank you.
no, I want to say thank you. This was an incredible interview, and it really opened my eyes to not just what you do, but what you give back and what you want to contribute. It's always amazing to hear musicians who are as accomplished as you are still feel so ambitious and still feel that their work isn't done yet. And I'm really looking forward to what else you do, whether it's a book or it's your YouTube channel. Links will be in the description below to DrSynthLady's awesome channel. And
Thank you.
I really can't wait to see where your career continues to go.
Thank you. I hope together we will be stronger and together we will make the world a more musical place. So, a Turkish saying very rightfully describes that the only thing that is eternal is a beautiful sound hanging up in the air. It's actually a paradox and a metaphor because sound, as you know, dissipates. It's never up in the air, actually. It never stays hanging unless it is recorded. And what is that recording thing? It's just data. Is it the sound itself? But no, I think it's the legacy, it's the memory, it's just the sense of beauty that lingers. Even when you're gone, everybody else is gone. It is that achievement through art and music that lingers. So I love this saying. I just wanted to end with it.
And thank you so much. I'm sure everyone else will appreciate that saying. It's very
Poetic.
there we go. No other word except poetic that works for that. Thank you once again. Do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Well, just stay with music and support your local musicians. They need it more than any time before. So support your local musicians when they can, when you can, basically. Just subscribe to their online gigs, maybe buy merchandise, that sort of thing. Just liking on YouTube, because people who just want to pull them down are never lazy to unlike their videos or just write derogatory comments on online dictionaries and such. But people who like those musicians and who want to support them are just too lazy. So please be generous with that. I think that's all most musicians are asking of you.
I agree. Thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome. I'm looking forward to this interview so that I could share it too.
Awesome. Cool. This was Kero Riripado, and I was here today with Fulya, who has an amazing channel that you guys will be able to check out, and I'm sure you'll be able to take away a lot from not just this interview, but her content as well. Thank you guys for coming to the channel. Take care.